Okay, this is chapter 2 of the book that we're reading. I have already made a playlist on YouTube so you can look back at the other videos to keep up to date. This is chapter 2. Okay, alright, candidates, this way and look lively. The speaker, or more correctly, the shouter, was Martin, secretary to Baron Harold. As his voice echoed around the anteroom, the 5 wards rose uncertainly from the long wooden benches where they had been seated. Suddenly nervous now that the day had finally arrived, they began to shuffle forward, each one reluctant to be the first through the great iron iron-bound door that Martin now held open for them. Come on, Martin bellowed impatiently. Alice finally elected to lead the way. As Will had guessed, as Will had guessed she would. The others followed the willow willowy willowy blonde girl. Now that someone had decided to lead, the rest of them were content to follow. Will looked around curiously as he entered the Baron's study. He'd never been in this part of the castle before. This tower, containing the administrative section and the Baron's private apartments, was seldom visited by those of low rank, such as castle wards. The room was huge. The ceiling seemed to tower above him, and the walls were constructed of massive stone blocks, fitted together with only the barest line of mortar between them. On the eastern wall was a huge window space, open to the elements, but with massive wooden shutters that could be closed in the event of bad weather. It was the same window he had seen through last night, he realized. Today, sunlight streamed in and fell on the huge oak table that Baron Harold used as a desk. And just move this down so you can see the rest of the paragraph. That'll be helpful, hey? Come on now, stand in line. Stand in line. Martin seemed to be enjoying his moment of authority. The group shuffled slowly into line and studied and he studied them, his mouth twisted in disapproval. In size, in size, please. Tallest this end. He indicated the end where he wanted the tallest of the 5 to stand. Gradually, the group rearranged itself. Horace, of course, was the tallest. After him, Alice took her position, then George, half a head shorter than she, and painfully thin. He stood in his usual stoop-shouldered posture. Will and Jenny hesitated. Jenny smiled at Will and gestured for him to go before her, even though she was possibly an inch taller than he was. That was typical of Jenny. She knew how Will agonized over the fact that he was the smallest of all the castle wards. As Will moved into the line, Martin's voice stopped him. Not you, the girl's next. Jenny shrugged apologetically and moved into the place Martin had indicated. Will took the last place in the line, wishing Martin hadn't made his lack of height so apparent. Come on, smarten up, smarten up. Let's see you at attention there, Martin continued, then broke off as a deep voice interrupted him. I don't believe that's totally necessary, Martin. It was Baron Harold who had entered unobserved by way of a smaller door behind his massive desk. Now, it was Martin who brought himself to what he what he considered to be a position of attention, with his skinny elbow held out from his side, his heels forced together so that his unmistakably bowed legs were widely separated at the knees, and his head thrown back. Before Baron Harold raised his eyes to heaven. Sometimes his secretary's zeal on these occasions could be a little overwhelming. The Baron Harold was a big man, Baron broad in shoulders and waist, and heavily muscled, as was necessary for a knight of the realm. It was well known, however, that Baron Harold was fond of his food and drink, so his considerable bulk was not totally attributed to muscle. And then seeing the next bit there, paragraph, look at that. He had a short, neatly trimmed black beard that, like his hair, was beginning to show the traces of grey that were with his 42 years. He had a strong jaw, a large nose, and dark, piercing eyes under heavy brows. Sorry. It was a powerful face, but not an unkind one, Will thought. There was a surprising hint of humour in those dark eyes. Will had noticed it before. On the occasion when Harold had made his infrequent visit to the ward's quarters to see how their lessons and personal development were progressing. Sir, Martin said at top volume, causing the Baron to wince slightly, the candidates are assembled. Oh, look at that. Moving up. Assembled. I can see that, Baron Harold replied patiently. Perhaps you might be good enough to ask the craftsmasters to step in as well. Sir, Martin responded, making an attempt to click his heels together, as he was wearing shoes of a soft, pliable leather. The attempt was doomed to failure. He marched towards the main door of the study, all elbow and knees. Will was reminded of a rooster. As Martin laid his hand on the door handle, the Baron stopped him once more. Martin, he said softly, as the secretary turned an inquiring look back at him. He continued in the same quiet tone. Ask them. Don't bellow at them. Craftmasters don't like that. Yes, sir, said Martin, looking somewhat deflated. Deflated. He opened the door and, making an obvious effort to speak in a lower tone, said, Craftmasters, the Baron is ready now. The craftsmaster heads entered. No, the craft school heads entered the room in no particular order of precedence. As a group, as they group, as a group, they arrived and respected one another, and so rarely stood on strict ceremonial procedure. Sir Rodney, head of the battle school, came first, tall and broad-shouldered, like the Baron. He wore the standard battle 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 dress of chainmail shirt under a white surcoat embezzled with his own crest. A, a scarlet wool shard. He had earned that crest as a young man, fighting the wolf ships of the Scandinavian Sea raiders, who constantly harried the kingdom's sea coast. He wore a sword belt and sword, of course. No knight would be seen. No knight would be seen in public without one. He was around the Baron's age, with blue eyes and a face that would have been remarkably handsome if it weren't for the massively broken nose. He sported an enormous moustache, but unlike the Baron, he had no beard. Next came Ulf, the horsemaster, responsible for the care and training of the castle's mighty battle horse. He had keen brown eyes, strong muscular forearms, and heavy wrists. He wore a simple leather vest over his woolen shirt and leggings. Tall, tall riding boots of soft leather reached up past his knees. Lady Pauline followed Ulf. Slim, grey-haired, and elegant, she had been a considerable beauty in her young and still had the grace and style of to turn men's heads. Lady Pauline, who had been awarded the title in her own right. For her work in foreign policy for the kingdom, was head of the diplomatic service in Redmont. Baron Harold regarded her abilities highly, and she was one of his close confidants and advisers. Harold often said that girls made the best recruits to the diplomatic service. They tended to be more subtle than boys, who gravitated naturally to battle school, and while boys constantly looked to physical means as the way of solving problems, girls could be depended on the use on to use their wits. It was perhaps only natural that Nigel, the scribe's master, followed close behind Lady Pauline. They had been discussing matters of mutual interests while they waited for Martin to summon them. Nigel and Lady Pauline were close friends as well as professional colleagues. It was Nigel's trained scribes who prepared the official documents and communiques. What? Communiques that were so often delivered by Lady Pauline's diplomats. He also advised on the exact wording of such documents. Having an extensive background in legal matters, Nigel was a small, wiry man with a quick, inquisitive face that reminded Will of a ferret. His hair was glossy black, his features were thin, and his dark eyes never ceased roaming the room. Master Chubb, the castle cook, came in last of all. Inevitably, he was a fat, round-bellied man, wearing a cook's white jacket and a tall hat. He was known to have a terrible temper that could flare as quickly as oil spilled on a fire. And most of the wards treated him with considerable caution. Florid-faced and with red, rapidly receding hair, Master Chubb carried a wooden ladle with him wherever he went. It was an unofficial staff of office. It was also used quite often as an offensive weapon. Offensive weapon, landing with a resounding crack on the hands of careless, forgetful, or slow-moving kitchen apprentices. Alone among the group, Jenny was saw Chubb as something of a hero. It was her avowed intention to work for him and learn his skills, wooden ladle or no wooden ladle. There were other craftsmasters, of course. The armorer and the blacksmith were too, but only those craftsmasters who currently had vacancies for new apprentices would be represented today. The craftsmasters are assembled, sir, Martin said, his voice rising in volume. Martin seemed to equate volume and the importance of the occasion in direct proportion. Once again the Baron raised his eyes to Haven. "So I see," he said quietly, then added in a more formal tone, Good morning, Lady Pauline. Good morning, gentlemen," they replied, and the Baron turned to Martin once more. "Perhaps we might proceed." Martin nodded several times, consulted a sheet of notes he held in one hand, and marched to confront the line of candidates. "Right, the Baron's waiting. Who's first?"